One of the loudest voices attacking Shedeur Sanders just hit reverse. Hard. Cris Carter, Hall of Famer and longtime media heavyweight, just publicly apologized after spending months questioning Shedeur's talent, leadership, and future in the NFL. And the timing of this flip is what makes it wild. It didn't happen randomly. It happened right after the Cleveland Browns made their 2026 quarterback direction clear. That's not coincidence. That's pressure. Because for a long time, Shedeur Sanders wasn't treated like a rising quarterback. He was treated like a debate topic. Analysts argued about his arm. Critics questioned his mindset. Former players doubted whether he was built for the league. And Cris Carter was one of the loudest pushing that narrative. He didn't hedge. He didn't soften his takes. He went all in. Now he's backtracking. And when a Hall of Famer suddenly admits he was wrong, that tells you something bigger is happening behind the scenes. This isn't just about one apology. This is about a complete shift in how Shedeur Sanders is being viewed across the league. The same media voices that once tried to slow the hype are now racing to keep up with reality. The tone changed. The criticism faded. And suddenly the conversation isn't about whether Shedeur belongs anymore. It's about how far he can go. That's a powerful pivot. Because moments like this expose how fast narratives collapse when performance starts talking. You can control opinions. You can push storylines. But once the league commits and the tape stacks up, the excuses disappear. And here's what makes this even crazier. Cris Carter didn't just apologize. He went further. He suggested Cleveland should move on from other quarterbacks immediately. That's not hesitation. That's surrender. That's someone realizing the direction has already been chosen. But the most shocking part, this isn't the first apology Shedeur Sanders has forced. There's a growing list of analysts who once doubted him and are now scrambling to clean up old takes. And when you rewind what they originally said, this reversal becomes even more uncomfortable. Because some of those comments weren't just wrong. They were personal. And now the same people who questioned Shedeur's ceiling are watching him rewrite his story in real time. But this didn't happen overnight. And once you see what Cris Carter used to say, this apology hits completely differently. Before Cris Carter apologized, he didn't just doubt Shedeur Sanders. He tried to tear him down. For months, Carter positioned himself as one of Shedeur's loudest critics, not quiet skepticism. Not cautious analysis, full-on dismissal. He questioned Shedeur's arm strength. He criticized his size. He claimed Shedeur didn't have elite athletic tools. And he made it clear he didn't believe Shedeur was built for the NFL spotlight. But the comment that really stuck. Carter said Shedeur Sanders should be a fifth-round pick. Think about that. Fifth round. That wasn't evaluation. That was erasure. That was pushing a narrative that Shedeur wasn't even worthy of serious franchise investment. And once that idea hit the public space, it spread fast. Fans repeated it. Other analysts referenced it. The label started sticking. And Carter didn't stop there. He went after Shedeur's environment. He openly suggested that Deion Sanders had hurt his son's development by protecting him too much. He framed Shedeur as someone who hadn't faced real adversity, someone who hadn't been tested properly, someone who might crack once the NFL pressure hit. That wasn't football critique anymore. That was character judgment. Week after week, those takes circulated. Clips went viral. Headlines formed around doubt instead of development. And suddenly, Shedeur wasn't just fighting defenses on Sundays. He was fighting perception every single day. What made it worse? Carter spoke with authority, Hall of Fame credibility, media respect. When someone with that resume speaks, people listen, and that gave those criticisms extra weight. But here's the part most people missed. While Carter was talking, Shedeur was working. While narratives were forming, Shedeur was preparing. And while critics were building walls around his ceiling, he was quietly stacking proof. Because everything Carter said was about to collide with reality. And once that collision happened, the story flipped fast. Everything changed the moment Cleveland made their direction clear. The Browns didn't tiptoe around it. They didn't leave room for speculation. They sent a message. Shedeur Sanders isn't just part of the plan, he is the plan. Their quarterback moving forward, their investment, their future. And once that announcement hit, the entire conversation shifted overnight. Because now this wasn't just analysts debating potential anymore. This was an NFL organization putting real credibility behind Shedeur. When a franchise commits publicly, it forces everyone else to react. Media voices can't pretend it's hypothetical. Scouts can't dismiss it as hype. Former players can't sit comfortably on old takes. That's when the pressure started building. Cris didn't apologize in a vacuum. He apologized after Cleveland made it clear they weren't second-guessing this decision. That timing matters, because it signals something deeper. Carter wasn't responding to rumors. He was responding to reality. And that reality was simple. Shedeur Sanders had moved from debate topic to franchise direction. Once that happened, the narrative wall collapsed. Suddenly, the questions weren't about whether Shedeur belonged. They became about how Cleveland would build around him, how fast he could develop, what weapons he would get, what ceiling he could reach. That's a completely different conversation. And Carter's reaction exposed that shift. Not only did he admit he was wrong, he went even further. He suggested Cleveland should immediately move on from other quarterback options. That's not mild support. That's alignment with the new direction. Which tells you one thing. Even the loudest critics could see the momentum was no longer stoppable. Because when front offices commit, media has two choices: adjust or get left behind. And Carter chose to adjust. But here, where it gets even crazier. Cris wasn't the first one to flip. He wasn't even close. Because once Shedeur started stacking proof, a wave of reversals followed. And some of those names will surprise you. Cris wasn't alone. Once the Browns locked in their direction and Shedeur Sanders kept delivering, the dominoes started falling. One by one, the same voices that once doubted him began walking back their words. First came Rex Ryan. And people remember that one. Rex didn't just criticize Shedeur. He questioned his character. He mocked his posture. He suggested he wasn't serious enough. He framed him as entitled instead of earned. Those clips spread fast and stuck even longer. Then the tape started speaking. Shedeur kept showing poise, command, control. The moments that mattered didn't scare him, and suddenly Rex Ryan's tone changed. The same voice that once dismissed him was now praising his football IQ and maturity. That flip wasn't subtle, it was public. Then came Tony Grossi. This one hit harder because it dragged on for months. Practice reports, training camp takes, injury speculation, constant negativity. Grossi repeatedly questioned Shedeur's readiness and suggested Cleveland made a mistake even giving him opportunities. But once the on-field gap became visible, once the difference in command and decision-making couldn't be ignored anymore, that narrative collapsed too. Even Grossi had to adjust. And then there was Mary Kay Cabot. Every time she raised doubts about Shedeur's ceiling, he answered with another strong performance. Over and over again. It reached a point where continuing to question him started looking forced. That's when the tone softened. And that's when the pattern became obvious. This wasn't coincidence. This was a trend. When enough evidence stacks up, denial becomes embarrassing. And these analysts understood something important. Being wrong quietly is one thing. Being wrong on record repeatedly is another. So they pivoted. Some apologized directly. Others shifted language. Others avoided the topic completely. But the direction was clear. Shedeur Sanders wasn't the question anymore. He was becoming the answer. But that raises an even bigger question. What actually forced this wave of reversals? Because this wasn't about feelings. It was about something far more powerful. Results. Here's the part the critics couldn't escape. Shedeur Sanders didn't win this argument with interviews. He didn't win it on social media. He didn't win it with hype. He won it on the field. Once the opportunities came, he delivered. Clean reads, calm pocket presence, smart decisions under pressure. He didn't look overwhelmed. He didn't rush throws. He didn't panic when things broke down. That matters more than arm strength debates or body measurements ever will. Because football exposes everything. You can hide behind opinions for a while. You can argue projections. You can debate ceilings. But once the film stacks up, the truth becomes visible to everyone. And that's what happened here. Each game added evidence. Each drive chipped away at old narratives. Each confident moment forced analysts to confront something uncomfortable. They were wrong. Not about one detail. About the entire evaluation. What made this even more powerful was Shedeur's approach. He didn't chase validation. He didn't play emotional football. He stayed disciplined, prepared, locked in. Teammates responded to him. Coaches trusted him. That leadership shows up long before box scores ever do. And when leadership pairs with production, perception changes fast. This is where the shift became unavoidable. Because critics weren't just facing fan reaction anymore. They were facing professional reality. Coaches started speaking differently. Front offices started treating Shedeur differently, and that sent a clear signal. The league believed. Once that happened, media voices had no choice but to follow. But there's another layer to this story. Because not all of these apologies were about honesty. Some of them were about survival. Let's be real. Not every apology came from sudden respect. Some came from fear. Because in sports media, being wrong once is forgivable. Being wrong repeatedly on a rising star, that damages careers. Cris, Rex Ryan, Tony Grossi, and others all understood the same thing at the same time. If Shedeur Sanders keeps climbing, every old clip, every harsh comment, every dismissive take is going to resurface. And once fans start replaying those moments, credibility takes a hit. Hard. That's why the timing matters so much. These reversals didn't happen early. They happened after Cleveland committed, after performance stacked up, after momentum became undeniable. That's not coincidence. That's damage control. When analysts see the direction shifting, they don't want to be remembered as the ones who missed it. They don't want to become examples of outdated evaluation. So they pivot early. They soften language. They reframe past criticism. They move from "he can't" to "he's developing." It's strategic. And it's common. Because being late is safer than being wrong forever. This doesn't mean the praise is fake, but it does mean the motivation isn't always pure. Public opinion moves fast, and media moves faster. What makes this situation different? Shedeur Sanders didn't help them save face. He didn't give interviews attacking critics. He didn't respond publicly to the noise. He didn't make it easier for anyone to spin narratives, which actually made it worse for them. Because when a player stays silent and keeps producing, there's no excuse left, no distraction, no emotional angle to lean on. Just results. And that's what forced the shift. But the most impressive part of this story isn't what the analysts did. It's how Shedeur handled the pressure while all of this was happening. While critics were arguing on TV and online, Shedeur Sanders took a completely different approach. He went quiet. No social media battles, no public callouts, no emotional responses, no interviews aimed at proving people wrong. Just work. And that might be the most dangerous response of all. Because silence paired with performance is powerful. It removes distractions. It forces people to focus on results instead of drama, and that's exactly what Shedeur did. Every week the pressure grew, every mistake was magnified, every good play was dissected. He was carrying expectations, criticism, and narrative weight at the same time. And he didn't crack. Instead, he showed consistency. He showed discipline. He showed command. Teammates trusted him. Coaches gave him responsibility. The locker room followed his lead. That's not something you fake. That's leadership forming in real time. This is what separates short-term hype from long-term quarterbacks. The ability to stay composed while everything around you is loud. The ability to focus on preparation while your name is trending for the wrong reasons. Shedeur handled it like a professional long before he was labeled one. And that maturity is what made the apology wave even more uncomfortable for critics. Because now they weren't just wrong about talent. They were wrong about character. And that stings more. But this story doesn't stop at individual growth. Because what Shedeur just did is already changing how the league thinks. And the ripple effect is just getting started. What's happening with Shedeur Sanders isn't staying inside Cleveland's building. It's spreading across the league. Front offices are watching this closely. Coaches are paying attention. Scouts are rethinking old formulas. Because Shedeur just exposed a flaw in how quarterbacks have been evaluated for years. For a long time, the NFL prioritized prototypes, big arms, big frames, raw athletic upside. If you didn't check those boxes, you were labeled limited before you ever stepped on the field. Shedeur broke that mold. He proved that processing speed, preparation, leadership, and decision-making can outweigh physical traits. That composure under pressure matters more than highlight throws. That winning the locker room is just as important as winning scouting debates. And once one player proves that model wrong, others benefit. Young quarterbacks entering the league now have a blueprint. They see that narrative isn't permanent. That early criticism doesn't define careers. That development can flip perception faster than any draft ranking. This creates a ripple effect. Teams become more open-minded. Coaches invest differently. Media becomes more cautious about labeling players too early. And that's impact beyond the stat sheet. But here's the part that adds pressure. When you change expectations, you also raise them. Because now Shedeur isn't just proving people wrong. He's setting standards. And that means the spotlight is only getting brighter. Which leads to the biggest moment still ahead. Because everything up to now was the climb. What happens next will determine the legacy. Cris Carter's apology wasn't just a moment. It was a signal. A signal that the narrative around Shedeur Sanders has officially changed. What started as doubt turned into respect. What began as criticism turned into acknowledgement. And what once looked like controversy is now shaping into a franchise story. But the most important part, Shedeur didn't win this with noise. He won it with consistency. While analysts debated, he prepared. While critics talked, he performed. And while narratives tried to box him in, he quietly broke through them. Now the Browns have committed. The league is paying attention. And the same voices that once doubted him are lining up to adjust their stories. That doesn't erase what was said. But it does prove something powerful. Work travels further than opinions. And this moment isn't the finish line. It's the beginning of a new phase. A phase where expectations rise, where pressure increases, where leadership becomes real responsibility. Because now Shedeur isn't just proving people wrong. He's carrying the weight of belief. And that's heavier than doubt ever was. So here's the real question. Do you think these apologies are genuine? Or are analysts simply trying to protect their reputations before history proves them wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns that cut through hype and show what's really happening behind the scenes, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this story isn't over. And if Shedeur keeps delivering, this won't be remembered as a comeback. It'll be remembered as the moment the league got it wrong and had to admit it. And one more thing before you go. What just happened with Cris Carter is only the surface. There are already reports circulating about internal tension inside Cleveland's quarterback room, front office pressure behind the scenes, and quiet moves being planned around Shedeur's development path. Some insiders believe the Browns are preparing to reshape the entire offense around him sooner than expected. If that's true, this apology wave might just be the first domino. Because when organizations start restructuring around one player, the stakes explode. And the next phase of this story could be even bigger than the comeback itself. Stay locked in. Because what happens next could change everything. If you think this apology wave is wild, wait until you see what's coming next. There's already buzz about roster changes, coaching pressure, and internal decisions being made specifically around Shedeur's future. Some of it hasn't even gone public yet. That breakdown is coming next. So don't click away. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in, because this story is only getting louder.